Welcome, family, to Black Woman's Renaissance. I am your host, Dr. Violet T. Adams, educator, speaker, writer, artist, all things woman, and creator of Black Woman's Renaissance. Today, I welcome back my co-host, educator, author, publisher, and editor-in-chief of Vision and Purpose Lifestyle Magazine, Dr. Sharon H. Porter. Sharon.
Hello. So glad to be back. Dr. Adams, thank you so much for having me back. Excited for this interview tonight.
Thank you. Glad to have you back. And of course, today we have a special guest. Ooh, I'm so doped up about this. Yes. Black Woman's Renaissance will honor our live guest, Miss Ashely M. Jones, Alabama's new Poet Laureate, the first youngest and Black Poet Laureate for Alabama. Ashely, we're so excited about having you join us tonight, and we're going to let you introduce yourself to our family.
Thank you, Dr. Adams and Dr. Porter, for having me. I feel like I'm missing my PhD. I don't have one yet, but but I feel like I need to get one to get on y'all's level. But thank you. But yeah, I'm Ashely. I am the Alabama State Poet Laureate. I was actually just commissioned last Wednesday was my official commissioning ceremony, which is interesting. I could talk more about that later because it was very, very interesting ceremony. But I am, as you said, the youngest and the first person of color to serve in the state's 91-year history of the position. So almost a whole century has gone by. Aside from that, I'm a poet. I have 3 books of poetry. My first book, Magic City Gospel, was published by Hub City Press. My second book, Dark Thing, was published by Pleiades Press. And then my most recent collection, Reparations Now, was published also by Hub City Press this year. And I'm currently working on a book of critical essays, which again, speaking of PhDs, I never thought I would be working on critical essays because I'm just a poet, you know what I mean? But but I'm working on that collection. More than
just a poet.
Thank you. That collection, I think y'all will find very interesting. It's called What the Mirror Said, The Necessity of Black Women Poets. So that'll be coming out, hopefully, I think in 2023, with the University of Michigan Press's Poets on Poetry series. So yeah, I teach at many levels. I teach primarily, during the school year at the Alabama School of Fine Arts in Birmingham. That's Fine Arts High School, which serves 7th through 12th grade students in Birmingham. And then I also am on the core faculty of the Converse University Low Residency MFA program. So I teach from 7th grade to grad school across the country. So.
Awesome. And that is why you are our Black Woman of Renaissance again this week. Welcome. Well, I am looking forward to a wonderful conversation today with Ashely. And of course, my co-host Sharon and I are ready to dig in to get some more insight of who you are. Our last recording, we introduced Ashely, her book, Reparations Now. And our conversation was primarily about reparations. And of course, through our research and our conversation, we were enlightened about this conversation of reparations. But of course, there's a lot more to Ashely. And we're going to let you hear from her in her own words, from her own voice today. And I have a question, Ashely. While I was doing my research on you, I discovered that your dream of being Poet Laureate began in the tender school year of 2nd grade. Oh my God. So tell us a little more about that project and that moment in life that was obviously pivotal for you.
Sure. Yeah. I always joke that I was born, 75 years old, even though I'm young. I would joke that when I came out, I was already really, really mature, for my age. So I've always sort of been, a focused kind of kid. And so when I was 7, I had already, been into reading and writing. I learned to read when I was 3. My mom actually made sure that all of us were reading very, very early and writing. She stayed home with us. Her training is in social work, but once she started having kids, she and my dad decided that one of them had to stay home, and help us. So she was the one to do it, and so she helped us all learn how to read and write. And every day, that's what we did. We read. She gave us vocabulary. We did art. We watched public television. We were all just artsy little old people children, not really causing any trouble, just reading books and singing songs and stuff like that, making art. So I was already that kind of child. And the school that we went to is called Epic Elementary. It's in Birmingham. And that school was very focused on art, actually. So we did all of our regular, reading, writing, arithmetic, all that kind of, math. I see how I'm aging myself already saying arithmetic, like that's what we called it. We didn't call it that. But yes, we did all of that.
We called it the older. Right. That's right, Sharon. That's what we got. Arithmetic.
I'm an youngster. Old soul. What can I say? Yes. People have been telling me that my whole life. They're like, "Ooh, I don't know about you," So anyway, so in addition to our regular lessons, there was always an art component to what we did at that school. So every year we would make books. I still have at my parents' house little books that I made as a young person. And back then, I really thought I was going to be a fiction writer, which looking back, maybe that would have been the more lucrative, path to take, but whatever. When I was 7, I had an assignment in my class, and I was in self-contained gifted, which I have thoughts on, but we're probably not here for my thoughts on the efficacy of that model. But I was in there, and the assignment was to memorize something, anything, and then come to class and recite that thing like in costume. So I just happened to be reading this book called Honey, I Love by Eloise Greenfield. And it was unusual for me because I didn't read poetry normally. That wasn't really what I read. And also this book was full of Black people, but it wasn't something that made me uncomfortable or afraid. And what I mean by that is I did grow up in a very Black-centric house. Everything about our upbringing was pointed toward making sure we appreciated our Blackness and we're proud of it. So when we learned about God, we learned that God could be Black, Jesus could be Black, anything dealing with religion could be rooted in Blackness. We learned that Santa could be Black. My dad painted a Santa brown one year. And we still have that Santa, just to, again, ensure that we knew anything could be Black and also could be good. Coloring books, even if we had like a traditionally white character in the coloring page, we knew we could color her brown. All of our dolls were Black. My mom made sure that we had an array of brown Barbies. And at the time we were like, Mom, how come we can't have other kinds? We didn't understand that what she was doing was making sure that we could dream of ourselves as beautiful and as successful and as, the pinnacle of womanhood. So I grew up in that environment, but then I watched Roots. My parents, as many Black parents, did, had us to watch Roots. And that totally scared me. I was like, oh no, they're going to come take us. And I just got afraid, of Black things. So there was a little period of time where I just avoided anything with Black people in it because I was afraid of, what would happen to the characters or afraid for what happened to me. So when I found this book, it's a long preamble. I'm a teacher and I'm a poet and I'm a Leo, so it's layers of talkativeness.
I love it.
So when I found this book, Honey, I Love, it was so incredible because there were Black people, but there was joy as well. There was not just the pain, there was the joy. And I'm grateful now that our movement of writers has understood how important it is for us to experience that Black joy. But as a little 7-year-old, I was just like, man, this is great. You know, there's all these different poems and there's pictures, there was illustrations in the book as well. And you could see all these beautiful Black people, and the way that the language was written too was really appealing to me, because it had what I now know to call the African-American vernacular. Back then, it was just like, oh, they sound like Black people, because I was this little like proper speaking, you know, hard R girl. And, you know, my parents really liked it because it was like, oh, you're getting a good education. But I was like, I want to sound like everybody else. Like, I feel like I don't sound like my family, my, you know, aunts, grandmas, all that. And so reading this book, I was able to inhabit so many parts of my Blackness that I just had thrown away or had ignored or, you know, was afraid of. So there was a poem in that book called Harriet Tubman. And that's the poem that I chose to memorize. So I worked on memorizing that piece. My mom came to school to help me dress up as Harriet Tubman. And I remember it was like a white dress and like a little white handkerchief that I put on. And, you know, at that time too, I had a lot of insecurities. Even though I was 7, as I mentioned before, I was always a little mature for my age. So I was having existential crises, you know, at 7 years old, because I had enlarged tonsils and adenoids. So I always sounded very stuffy. I hated the sound of my own voice. I was a little shy. So, you know, public speaking was not something that I really wanted to do. But I remember getting in front of the class and reciting that poem. And the poem begins, Harriet Tubman didn't take no stuff, wasn't scared of nothing neither, didn't come in this world to be no slave, and wasn't going to stay one either. And I remember reciting that poem and just feeling so confident and powerful and Black and strong. And so I knew at that moment, I have to feel this again. I could maybe write these things called poems. And so I started to write them in my little notebook that I carried around. And I wasn't writing poetry in it before. It was actually my spy journal before, because I was really obsessed with Harriet the Spy. So I started writing poems and just never looked back. And so I, you know, as a little mature, you know, old lady Ashely, I started to make all these plans for my life. And I knew that I wanted to be a poet. I knew I wanted to publish books. You know, I wanted to be somebody, quote unquote. And the Poet Laureate piece came into view a little bit later than 7. But once I learned what that was, that there could be a Poet Laureate of the nation, I was like, ooh, I think I want to do that. Then I learned you could be a Poet Laureate of a state. I was like, okay, cool. I think I want to do that too. And so over the years, I've just sort of, you know, tried to take steps to reach those goals. So that's how it all started.
Awesome. That whole thing about sounding Black or sounding white is a topic of another show. We will definitely tackle that.
Exactly.
Sharon.
Wow, yes. And so I want to just move on to your latest book, Reparations Now. Sure. I've heard, you know, I've doing my research and just you talking about the book. You give a very explicit reason of the exclamation mark at the end of the title of Reparations Now. If you will, please just share a little bit about why that's important and what it denotes for you.
Yeah, well, there's a lot of things in that exclamation point. And so I'm trying to see where I want to start today. I don't know what I said in the past, so let's hope that that same spirit is with me today. but for one, this is not a passive demand. It's very urgent. We are so past due for reparations. In fact, they were due to us the moment somebody stepped foot in Africa to capture somebody else. That's when it started. Wow. It's been an exclamation point since 1619, right? And here we are in the year 2021. So we are very past due in all of these things that we're owed. And it's not something like a check. That's not going to solve it all.
Right.
People who think that that's all that we're asking for, and it's obviously not 40 acres and a mule anymore. I mean, what am I going to do with that? You know, what I need is maybe the metaphorical 40 acres and that mule as well. You know, there are urgent needs. Like I'd like to be able to enter a store and not feel uncomfortable putting my hands in my pockets, not feel afraid, you know, if something falls next to me and, you know, I'm my hands are somewhere else. You know what I mean? You know that feeling where you're like, oh, they're gonna be looking at me, because it happens, to all of us. Right. I'd love to be able to walk down the street and, be in a neighborhood that's maybe not my own and not feel like somebody's gonna call the cops. I'd like to be able to see cops behind me, just driving and not immediately feel fear,
Right.
I've never been, wrongfully arrested like so many people have, or detained in any way. However, the fear is ever present for me.
Right.
Ever present. And I've told people before, I'm like, don't think that we're afraid because we did something. That's never the fear. I mean, at least not in my life. It's not like, oh no, they're going to find out. It's, oh no, I'm Black right now. And this might be the day that I become Sandra Bland, or, any of these people who have been killed. So these are the requests or the demands rather, not really requests. These are demands that we are making. And the time for them is now. Just like George Wallace could so boldly say, segregation now, tomorrow, and forever. We then must answer with reparations now, tomorrow, and forever.
Tomorrow and forever. Yeah. Yeah. I agree. And are you familiar with House Bill 40?
House Bill 40. Tell me what's in House Bill 40. I don't know him by name.
House Bill 40 was introduced in 1983 and has been on the floor since then. And it is asking for a commission to investigate the possibilities of reparations and what they could look like.
It's been on the floor since 83, you said?
Yeah.
Wow, I'm surprised it made it to the floor.
Well, how about that? It actually did this past April, did leave the floor to go into committee, and there's been nothing said or done on that since then. However, it at least they did finally agree. Well, we can research it. I am pleased, however, seeing the silver lining that it still exists. After all of this time, it still exists, and there's hope.
Right.
We are the only abused group of people in America who have not been given reparations or an ability to compensate for the losses.
Right.
Native Americans, Japanese who were interned. There were so many opportunities to do right by us. And at every turn, there's been opposition.
Right.
And some of the things that they talked about, which is near and dear to my heart, is educational reparations. Free college to all Black Americans. It's a simple one. It's a simple one, and it is going to answer a lot of the economic problems, a lot of housing problems, et cetera, et cetera. Right. Free education. But what you talked about the meaning of reparations to you and how that it looks very differently than the 40 acres and a mule.
Right. Right.
What do you think is the most probable result? And do you think something like a House Bill 40 will ever exist, or the laws will exist that we will be compensated somehow?
Well, I definitely think it might not happen in my lifetime. There are some states that are.
It won't happen in your lifetime. I know it ain't gonna happen in mine. Yeah. I mean, I maybe I should be more hopeful than that. But just looking at how things have gone so far, I don't know. Like I said, some states are having conversations about reparations. Some counties, because sometimes you can't get the whole state to get behind it. And usually what comes out of it are, discussions and committees made, or just a formal apology, which is not the same as reparations. I mean, it's perhaps a good half step. I won't even say first step, because the first step would be actually doing something else, more tangible than an apology. But we are also seeing, different statues being taken down, buildings being renamed. But again, that's not a full step, because just because I renamed the building doesn't mean we're actually changing what's going on inside of that building. Right. It's just a new name. So for me, what I would hope could happen
is, of course, a formal acknowledgement. That is fantastic for something to be written down as an acknowledgement for what happened. But some of these programs that are more specific, like free college, like looking at the redlining that happens in our communities.
Redlining, property ownership.
Right. Property ownership as well. Looking at the police, the structure of the police force. We know how it was created. Right. If someone could just at the very least acknowledge how it began, then we can have a more meaningful conversation, right, about what it's doing now, how it may or may not be serving us. And even looking at our Constitution and those foundational documents, for me, is necessary, because we can't at this point in time pretend that the men who made those documents were somehow, idealistic and so open and progressive. How could that be true when right at their house they had slaves? How? It's impossible, And for us to still be living under these documents and these laws all these years later that were literally made against us.
Right.
How does that make any sense? So those are some things, some tangible things. And it probably would have to happen state by state, because it's difficult for anything to happen federally. And of course, that would be a long process too, because every state is different. My state is not currently having reparations conversations. We are having other kinds of conversations, like how we can keep our Confederate monuments up.
Right.
So, there's that.
That's for you.
Oh, yes, I live in Alabama. So, but that doesn't mean that there's not progressive groups and regions within the state. I'm very grateful for those, areas like Birmingham, where I live. There's a lot of us here who are trying to invigorate our communities and move in reparative ways, if not literal reparations, creating programs for our Black children, creating equal opportunity for our Black artists. That's part of what I'm trying to do with my organization. It's being able to pay everybody for their work and have free programs, so there's no one who's excluded, not just Black people, but people without homes, for example, people experiencing poverty. Everyone should have access, I think, to everything, but I'm just an artist, so art is what I can give access to.
Exactly.
But I think that's so important that people understand that if we start where we are, then it will lead to other things, because right now we may not see that federally. We may see some progress, but as you mentioned, and even as I said in the podcast earlier, there are certain areas that are beginning to make those conversations, and we just have to continue that, because little leads to much. And so we just have to continue that. So thank you for that.
Right. So there were a few things that were intriguing about you. One was that you left your home state, Alabama, and went for better and brighter grounds, Florida.
Well, different grounds, we'll just say.
Only in Florida. Tell us about that. You had this love-hate relationship, and Sharon and I had a conversation about this, how we can relate. From South Carolina, Sharon's
North Carolina
originally, and we can relate. But tell us about that struggle, that internal struggle you had, and how did you overcome that, so that now you are virtually an ambassador for that very state?
Yeah, I mean, I think for me, and I think for many of us from the South in general, when you grow up here, of course, you learn the history and you're living in it. Other regions of our country don't necessarily interact with their history at all. I mean, some people would have you believe they don't have any bad history in their state, period, which is a lie, we know, but in the South, it's just always around you. And especially in a place like Alabama, I mean, you can't take 2 steps without encountering the ghost of this person, the ghost of that person, all of this history is just alive here. So an offshoot of that is a feeling of shame that a lot of us have, because we feel like the image that the rest of the country has of us is the truth. People have a certain viewpoint of the Deep South, and they have had that viewpoint for a very long time, being able to sort of scapegoat us and say, oh, well, y'all are the problem. Even if we look back to the Civil War, obviously I am not pro-slavery at all. Like nobody out there mishear what I'm saying, you know, but there was an opportunity there for the rest of the country to say, ooh, look at them, look at what they're doing, not understand or forgetting or ignoring that the products that were being, you know, harvested and sent up to the north, that's what they were using. It helped the whole country. The entire country is dealing with this. But as a Southern person, you don't always feel that way. You feel like, oh, wow, we're the ones. We are terrible. We're doing this. We're doing that. We're the last place in this because they publish all these reports, you know. And Alabama and Mississippi are always neck and neck, you know, for the last.
South Carolina and Georgia is not too far behind.
Exactly. And so you start to feel like, oh, well, I got to get out of here if I'm going to like be something. There's no famous people from Alabama. They don't stay here. There's nothing here. It's not Atlanta. It's not LA. It's not New York.
Right.
And so you grow up just kind of with a sense of self-loathing. And so it even was at a point when I was younger, I don't have a Southern accent for real. So, you know, now I kind of wish that I had one. But back when I was a kid, I was like, well, I'm so glad nobody can tell where I'm from. Gotcha. And that's a horrible way to think about your home, you know, because I'm then negating my whole ancestry. You know, my grandmothers had thick Southern accents. They were beautiful. My parents have Southern accents. So many amazing people, so many freedom fighters, you know, were clearly Southern, you know. That's where all these amazing movements started. Even the Black Panthers started in Alabama, and people don't know that. They started here in Lowndes County. And so anyway, so I had this sort of, you know, self-loathing attitude toward Alabama and wanting to be a writer. I thought I really had to leave and go to a better place where there were, you know, more opportunities. And so in graduate school, I moved to Miami, and I attended Florida International University, which was a fantastic experience education-wise. The city of Miami is a different story. You know, you have to be really rich to live there comfortably. And I was a grad student, so you can do the math there, you know, a struggle. But, you know, when I left Alabama, that's really when I started to understand how much I loved Alabama. And I also understood what love actually means. It doesn't mean that the thing that you love is blameless, because we can look at our personal relationships and understand that people that we love are not perfect people. We're not perfect people, and people love us still. But those who love us take the time to, one, commit to us and stay in relationship with us, and to help us discover what it is that we could do to improve ourselves or our relationship, what have you. The same became true for me in Alabama. I missed it when I left, not only because my family was there, but because I realized that the culture of the South, of the Black South, of Alabama in general, were things that I really did enjoy. Because I didn't see them around me anymore. I was like, wow, where is the food? You know, where are the rolling hills? Where are the trees? Where is that sky? The sky is unmatched to me in the Deep South. Like, it's a different kind of sky than anywhere else.
It is.
And when I would look up, you know, in Miami, I'm like, wow, what is this? Like, this is not home. You know, I didn't feel attached. I didn't feel the soul tie, I guess. And that's not true for everybody. Some people move and find that feeling, you know, somewhere else. But for me, I realized that it was the South that made me feel that way. And I also realized that I couldn't run away and not try to make it the place that I know it could be. You know, if I had the audacity to say that it was bad in this way and that way and the next way, I had to have the audacity then to go back and attempt to help fix it or help to make it better.
Yes, to improve it. I love it. So what were some of your challenges of getting to where you are now as reaching that dream you had way back when you recited that Harriet Tubman poem? Well, how can I do that?
Well, I mean, it was a lot of hard work, I have to say. I've been working hard since I was a little person. Even though I'm the youngest poet laureate, I have many years in the game, you know, writing and learning how to write and just figuring out who I was as a writer. And I think my biggest challenge, honestly, I mean, there's the usual things as a Black academic and a Black artist. There's always going to be people who, you know, don't value what you're doing, or try to tell you that you can't do it. And for me specifically, it was learning to trust my own voice. You know, when we go through our formal education, y'all know that's when you unlearn, at least the attempt is made to make you unlearn your own heritage. You know what I mean? Like, I started very rooted in Black poetry and the Black voice and celebrating Blackness as a young person. That's what I wrote about. Looking back at some of my old books when I was a little kid, there's poems about race in there. And I was a tiny little person just starting to write. I didn't shy away from that until I really started learning how to write formally. When I started to be in classrooms where I was the only Black person, you know, and you're trying to write. It's that struggle alone is enough, you know, even without the art part put on top of it.
Right.
But being an artist and going to that workshop table and, you know, presenting a piece that is true to you and your culture, and nobody at the table can relate, or comments are made, or people just don't receive it. I'll never forget being 13 in 8th grade, writing this really great, to me, a great poem about Black history. And it had like a sort of rhythm to it, you know, and a refrain. And I was so excited to perform this poem. And when I finished performing it at, we had annual readings at my school. When I finished performing it, some of my classmates came up and they were laughing and saying, "Oh, I didn't know you could rap, Ashely." And I was like, well, that's it. I'm not writing about this stuff anymore. I'm done. You know, so I tried to sound like everybody else. I tried to write like everybody else. And that was not, the poetry was bad. I mean, it was not good, you know. So the struggle I had really was understanding that what I had to say was enough, you know.
Yes.
That I had something to offer just as myself.
Yeah, I love that. Well, Ashely, what would be your advice to young poets out there who are just starting to find themselves in the words? You know, what advice do you have for them for their future?
Well, I would say the best piece of advice that I could give, and that I have been trying to give to anyone who will listen, is to really listen to yourself and trust yourself. And what I mean very specifically by that is you already have everything you need inside of you. What you have is enough. You are enough. Your voice is enough. If you want to be a poet professionally, don't let the academy or whoever, the powers that be, tell you that what you're writing is not important, that it's not good enough, that it's the wrong style, you know, that it's not going to be valuable to the market. We're not writing for the market per se. We're not, the reason that you write, if writing is something, you know, that is coming naturally to you, it's a gift that was given to you. So your only responsibility is to honor that gift. And the gift will take you where you need to go. You don't have to worry about the traditional structures or the traditional path. I didn't move to New York because that's not what the Spirit told me to do. I stayed where I was and wrote about Southern people and Black people and reparations. And the Spirit took me where I needed to go. The words found who they needed to find. And even if I never had won a single award, if somebody out there could be a 7-year-old Black girl reading my poem and feel less alone and feel possible, that's what I was here to do. And that's enough. So that's what I would tell them.
Awesome. I can totally relate as an artist. I'm a visual artist, and I went to school for graphic design. I realized that no one taught me the difference in art styles. No one taught me that I was not a graphic designer. Although I do a lot of designs, I know how to do graphic design because that's what I learned. However, I am a visual artist, and my art is very political. I paint what I want to paint. I paint what I feel. I don't sell a lot of work. I have about 60 paintings. Every once in a while, I'll be in the show, but my paintings are an extension of Violet. And there are a lot of art styles out there, but I love being called avant-garde because avant-garde is me and however I feel at that moment. And you have a freedom in listening to your own voice and marching to your own beat, a freedom that says whatever comes to me that God places in me to bring out is where I put it. And all of the famous artists, be it musical, be it visual, be it writers. We know them because of their own beat.
That's true. That is absolutely true.
You talked about returning to Alabama.
Mm-hmm.
How was that move back home? And I ask you that because sometimes we don't want to go back because of that fear of you shouldn't have left in the first place. I knew you'd be back.
Right.
Don't come back here all highfalutin.
Wow. Yeah, that's hilarious. And I know exactly what you're talking about. But luckily, I don't have those kind of people in my life. Everybody was happy to see me come back. In fact, it was more of, why are you leaving? That was really the question. I come from a very tight-knit family, so moving away, and I was lucky that my older sister went with me. She's a journalist and she's freelance, so she can work from anywhere. So she was able to come and make sure I didn't do anything crazy out there in Miami. But when I came back, it really was like, oh, we're glad you came back. We hope that you would, because, where I'm from in Birmingham, people usually leave and move to Atlanta and you never see them again. And, it's just like, man, if they had just come right back, we could have had you here. You could have been doing this stuff here. So yeah, people were excited. I was excited because it meant I wouldn't have to pay Miami prices anymore. That was great. But also there was just so much to come back to. I got a job. There was art just exploding all through the city. People were organizing in new ways, and things were just different, coming back. So it was good.
Do you think that return is a part of where you are today? In other words, had you remained in Miami, would you be Florida Poet Laureate?
Now there's an interesting question. So I said I was a Leo, so just keep that in mind with what I'm about to say.
Of course.
You already know.
I already know. Of course. You know
that. Yeah. But I only say that because I was raised to do my very best all the time and to put my whole self into what I do. And I already was very involved in Florida when I was there. I volunteered, I was involved. So I think if I had stayed there, I would have still been doing what I'm doing now, just in Miami, which is a bigger place, certainly. But yeah, I don't know if I'll be Florida Poet Laureate yet, because I don't know how their system works. Okay. But I would be on track. We'll say it that way.
Okay. How does Alabama's system work, and how do you get to that point?
So it's actually a pretty involved process. A lot of people assume that I just got a random call and poof, I'm Poet Laureate. But here it takes lots of steps. So the first step, of course, is having people know who you are. Somebody's got to be inspired to nominate you. And the nomination process is that you download a form. All of this is shepherded by a group called the Alabama Writers Cooperative. They've been choosing Poets Laureate since 1930 when it began. And so they submit these nomination packets. They ask me for my consent. It was funny. I was just telling somebody the other day that you have to be asked for consent, which is unusual in Alabama, that consent would matter, in this case.
How ironic.
Right. Right. So anyway, you have to give your consent. And so in that nomination packet, they include a writing sample. So I think it was 10 poems, something like that, my resume, and letters of support. So I had several people to do that for me and submit those packets. From there, I was judged against 3 or 4 other nominees by a committee that was appointed by the AWC. And that committee consists of writers from across the state, writers and writing advocates or people who are involved in the literary world. So from that meeting of the nomination committee, I was selected unanimously, which I'm very grateful for, to be the official selection or the official nominee. Then I went before the AWC's membership to be voted in as the official selection at our annual conference. From there, I had to wait to get on the governor's calendar. And last Wednesday, on the 1st, is when I was officially commissioned by the governor.
Awesome.
Um,
Awesome.
Let me ask you, Ashely, being the first Black
Mhm.
poet laureate, and you said this started in Alabama 1930.
Correct.
How big of a weight is that for you?
You know, it's a huge responsibility. And it's not lost on me what all of this means. You know, to know that I'm the first Black, yes, but I'm also the first non-white person, you know, period, which is staggering to think about in 91 years.
It really is.
It's not that we just got born, you know, last year. We've been here for a long time.
Absolutely.
But that just kind of speaks to the nature of progress. Of course, we always have all these progress narratives that people cling to, but we know in the day to day, there's a different reality. So it is a huge responsibility. And I do feel, I feel honored, but I also hope that I represent all of us well. You know, I hope that I am able to tear down this door, the gate, whatever, so that I'm not the last and that it's not 91 more years, so that there's a constant stream of diverse poets laureate after me. That's the hope, but it's scary at the same time, you know.
Yes. Very, very much so. We want to go ahead and give you the opportunity to tell our young people how important English language arts is. The arts, as well as perseverance and determination. In some final words, what words would you have for our young people?
Well, I'll start with perseverance because, and this always happens since my dad passed in April, he has found a way into every conversation I have. No matter what the conversation's about, he weaves his way in. And that word perseverance is one that I think of when I think of him, because that's what he taught us, how to just stick the course and do your best and just keep on keeping on, honestly. I mean, life is hard. It's difficult to reach our goals. It's not easy for anybody. You know, people can look at me and see, oh, she's 31, she's got 3 books, she's this, she's that. It must have been easy. Absolutely not.
No,
absolutely not. I worked hard to, you know, maintain my grades, to learn all I could learn, to learn about Black people in addition to what I was learning at school, because you already know that's not what they're teaching.
Already know.
So, you know, and trying to navigate
19 project.
Exactly. Navigate the publishing industry, you know, being a Black woman and being so vocal about politics and all of these things have been difficult, but I stayed the course because I believed in myself. And so that is what it takes. You know, it's not a cakewalk for anybody. And just saying cakewalk, that's a historical term, but we don't have time to get into that, you know. But I would, just tell them to believe in themselves enough to continue, you know, working hard toward their goals because they can reach them. And English language arts is incredibly important. And that's not just because I was an English major, but it's because it's true. You know, reading and writing is so valuable. Because of books. You know, we can learn our true history. That is so very important, especially now. Read for yourself and understand what happened, you know, in your country, in your area. And also it helps you to imagine. Imagination was so important to me as a child. If I had not learned that I could just make up a whole world inside my mind, my goodness, I'm still doing that to this day. It's the only way I could stay sane in the reality that we live in, to imagine another future. It's why I'm writing. It's why I'm, you know, an activist with my poetry, because I'm imagining a different future for those who come after. So I would encourage any young person, just start reading anything, please. Pick up any kind of book, whatever is interesting to you, read it, express yourself through writing. Even if you don't show anybody, take that time to write your thoughts down. It's healthy. It helps you to cleanse those thoughts out of your body and onto the page, helps you to think more clearly. And when you're faced with any sort of, you know, job opportunity, they're going to want you to be able to speak and write. So if you got all that down already, you're good to go.
Right there.
You know.
Yes, that one right there. Sister Sharon, give us some final words on about our guests and our topic for tonight.
Absolutely. One of the things that stuck out for me was trust your own voice. That resonated throughout this interview. And I
Love that.
believe that that is the key. And I don't believe that we as a people always believe that, that we look to others to validate us.
Right.
And we have to stop. Trust your own voice and know that you are enough. That was resonated with me throughout this interview. So thank you for that.
Very much so. So we are going to each give one takeaway. I think that was yours, Sharon. I did write that down, so you took my takeaway. But that one definitely does resonate with us. So give me a takeaway from our conversation, Ashely, for us to leave on.
Well, I think my takeaway is nothing that I said, because I don't know. I don't want to take away anything from me, from my own self. Yeah. Somebody else could take it away. But what I've taken from this conversation is really how healing it is just to be in conversation with our own people and to celebrate each other. I said that to you earlier, yes. Dr. Adams, that yes. Celebrating each other, specifically as Black women, but just in general as Black people, is so very important. I think we don't do it enough. You know, we see everything as a competition because yes. That's the structure that we're living in this, colonial, patriarchal, white supremacy society. Like that's what we're living in, but that's not the way. That's not how our people operate. And it's not how we succeed. We succeed when we are paying attention to each other, caring for each other, and celebrating each other. So this has been really great for me just to be in the Zoom room with the two of you and to feel safe and celebrated, and celebrating both of you, I hope I can see some of your art, Dr. Adams, at some point. Oh, I'm so curious to see it. Yeah.
Definitely. I'll give you my information about my art. Well, right now, I am on Facebook. I am Violet's Arts Passion. So look me up on Facebook, as well as my website is V's Arts Passion. V's Arts Passion. And you will see a lot of my artwork. I haven't printed my most recent pieces, but I will definitely add them to my collection. And that leads me to my takeaway. If you believe in something, start somewhere. It will never get done if you don't start it yourself. Don't wait for someone else to start it, because guess what? You have a purpose, and God may have given you that starting point to catapult the world to be something different. And that is my takeaway from our guest this afternoon. I am so excited. And I want to thank you personally, Ashely, because when I reached out to you, as I have every woman that I've featured, I have reached out to them to ask for a personal interview. And you are only the second one who has responded to me. And what? I am so doped over that. Because that tells me what kind of person you are. Not to say that there's anything wrong with the other women, but I want to say thank you for granting us your time and your attention and your words of wisdom, because your time is extremely important. Just as we all are, you are somebody. But we have chosen you to be our woman of Renaissance, because there's something special about Ashely. And you decided to humble yourself to come on and to talk to us one-on-one. And we truly, truly appreciate you. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. I was glad to be asked. My goodness.
Definitely. Well, this concludes our show for tonight. And you see now, as we've talked with Miss Ashely, and we've honored her as our Black woman of Renaissance, Ashely M. Jones. Please look up her work. And before we go, I would like to give her an opportunity to read something from one of her books.
Sure. I know just the poem I want to read.
Awesome.
This poem, I think it does not need any explanation, so I'll just go right into it. Okay. And it's from my most recent book, Reparations Now. It is entirely possible for a Black girl to be loved. See me, Black as I am, and call me beautiful. No revolution necessary, no brave needed, just loving me. It is not unusual to love me, Black as I am. It is not because I'm so strong, so exotic, so walk on the wild side. What side? See my skin. It's not chocolate or coffee or caramel. It is inedible. It is nothing to see with colonizers' eyes, nothing to trap with pity or praise, nothing to bruise, to make purple with your power. My skin is soft like anything soft. It is a reflection of God. It is a heavenly mirror. Don't you see that? You're there too. Black as I am, I can shine anything back. Even the sun wants to cling to me.
Ooh. Yes. Awesome. Yes. I felt that, sister. And I was all up in that poem. Yes. Well, Dr. Sharon, you have an online magazine. Would you like to tell the audience a little bit about your online magazine and what it has to do with today's podcast?
Absolutely. And it's a print magazine. So definitely, and I'm so excited that Dr. Violet T. Adams will start her Black Women's Renaissance column, and Miss Ashely M. Jones is going to be the first feature in our January, February issue. So we're really excited about that. So you can read more about Ashely in this edition, and also just see all of the wonderful features that Dr. Adams will be featuring in the magazine. So thank you for that.
And what's the name of your magazine and how can we get it?
Yes, Vision and Purpose Lifestyle Magazine. And the January, February is on sale now for pre-order at vnpmagazine.com, and it releases on January 1st. So very excited about that for this column. So thank you.
Awesome. And thank you, Dr. Sharon H. Porter, for giving us one more platform. Here we are. We have the poetry, we have the visual art, we have the magazine. We are representing, ladies. This is what we do. Woo! We got all bases covered. And of course, this wonderful podcast. And BWR community, it is your turn to celebrate with your sisters. We're still a young show and we need you to be successful. So we're asking you to tune into every episode, support the ladies that you've heard here tonight, pass on this information. And if you have a Black woman that you'd like to have us celebrate, drop me a line. Send me an email or a text message or contact me on LinkedIn or Facebook and I will get with you. I truly appreciate you joining us tonight. I truly appreciate Dr. Sharon Porter. Woo! And of course, our Black Woman Renaissance, Ashely M. Jones. Thank you, ladies. Thank you for sharing your word and being that Black sister that we know we are. It is our Renaissance. We're now marching boldly in our purpose. March on, sister.